Hello and welcome to another episode of the I can't speak, sorry. Great start, so professional. Anyway, hello and welcome to another episode of the original Intersexconnect Live, the place in and affecting intersex community where, oh my Lord, I can't read today. The place where people in and affecting the intersex community come together. I'm your host, Jessup Benedict. In this episode, we are joined by Juleigh Mayfield. Juleigh is an actress, activist, host of her own podcast, Rosé All, and an intersex person with 47 XXY. We're going to talk to her about growing up 47 XXY, the changes along the way, and how Disney was involved with helping her live her truth. To creating her podcast, memorable broadcast moments, and so much more. This is an interactive broadcast, so we will be able to respond to your comments real time. All right, so I'd like to talk about Juleigh forever, but we've got an amazing show to put on here. Juleigh's been my friend for quite 3 or more years. I am very happy to call Juleigh my friend, and if we can, we're just going to go ahead and jump right in and bring Juleigh up if we can, please. Hi, Juleigh. How are you? Uh-oh, can't hear you. Can you hear me? There you are.
Got there. You. Hi.
Hey, so thank you so much for being on the show. I can't tell you how much I appreciate it. It's quite amazing. I always have the first question for everybody is, are you intersex?
I am intersex.
All right. And a quick medical description of your variation?
Absolutely. I am 47XXY. Which also sometimes is
called,
also sometimes it's called Klinefelter's syndrome, although since about 2020, the NIH put out a directive that they don't want to call it that anymore. That Klinefelter syndrome.
They don't want to call it Klinefelter's anymore. Is that correct?
Correct. They're trying to
make sure I'm following.
They're just trying to go to 47XXY, and we're going to get into that a little bit later. But essentially, Klinefelter syndrome is a disease of the testicles. You have to be XXY to have Klinefelter syndrome, but not every XXY will have Klinefelter syndrome.
All right. So I don't want to go too deep into it right now.
Sure.
But what I do want to know is, like we always say in the intersex community, if you met one intersex person, you met one intersex person. What does this mean to you personally? How has it? Just what does it mean to you as a human being? The diagnosis that you've been given.
Sure, absolutely. And we'll dive more into my XXY story is not typical of most XXYs.
Right. That's why we call it that. Name the show that. Oh.
and I think the other thing to realize is going to you've met one intersex person, you've met one intersex person, is that XXYs will share a lot of common traits. But my journey is my journey. So what I've gone through may be 100 times different than what somebody else is going through in the XXY community and vice versa.
I can guarantee at least one person, yes.
That's why when I advocate, I try and advocate for the whole, and I know probably about 14 women globally that have gone through similar trajectories of mine. So I found out at 17. My family and I found out at 17, and it was after a routine physical because our football team in high school that I played on was switching divisions. And so, we went to a local pediatrician in the Orlando area, and he came back to my parents essentially and said, this is happening and this is happening, and I think he may have Klinefelter's, and I'd like to test for that. And so he did, and nothing like the medical community keeping the actual person that has the issue out of the conversation. But at 17, you're still under your parents'
So they didn't really discuss it with you at the time in any way, or?
My parents said, you have an extra chromosome, but we've been assured that that extra chromosome does not have a play in the overall scheme of things, and that you're still a male, and that, they believe that if we give you extra testosterone, that'll balance everything out and that'll make you more masculine. And, I tell people all the time, that was 1994.
Damn,
I was born in 75 in Alabama, but even if doctors in Alabama had that kind of research and information available, they weren't sharing it with people. And you and I both know, we've talked about it before, that the medical jurisdiction for so many years have pushed the XX and XY binary. And, and part of that story is get rid of them. If they're intersex, get rid of them. They're not normal. They're not going to have a viable place in the world. They're not going to do great things. They're going to be a struggle for you. They're going to be, and while that had been true up until 17 for my family, we really struggled with learning issues and being on maybe the autistic spectrum, but they didn't have a word for autism in the 70s and 80s. And, going through some of these common traits that a lot of XXY individuals face, kind of at 17, it gave us an answer, but at the same time, it still wasn't quantifying answers. And I didn't find out everything until my 40s.
And how do you feel about your parents then, and how do you feel about them now? Because they were, seriously, you've got an extra chromosome, but it doesn't matter. It's like, what the hell are you talking about?
That's what we were being told, and that's what they were being told. So this is how I feel about it.
When you're 17, you're inclined to believe these people, but your parents were what, in their 30s by then?
And my parents would have been in their 40s, respectively. And
at no point they said, what the heck? No, what?
Well, my parents are both educators. And they're very brilliant, smart people in their own right. And you have to remember too, at 17, I thought I was gay and I hadn't come out to them. So you have all of that social stigma attached. I was going off to college, which was huge, because they had been told I would struggle, and I did struggle academically all through my adolescence. And so even just going to a 4-year accredited university was a big deal. And I had struggled all through private school, and my parents never let me slide. Now,
that's good.
Going away to college, I did have animosity, and they were trying to get me to join support groups. And I was like, I'm not joining a support group. I'm not going into, I'm going to college, and I'm going to do that. And we're just going to fly by the seat of my pants. And I had a little bit of animosity towards them. But now versus now, I understand, and I think we all do as we become adults. My dad once said to me, you don't get a book when you have your parents. They don't give you How to Raise a Kid for Dummies. And so I understand first and foremost that my parents and I and my siblings, we've all been in the same storm as to when we've learned things and what we've learned. We're just in very different boats. So,
I still say today that because there are no mental health doctors or primary care doctors for intersex children, that it's pretty much Mr. and Mrs. Smith. We cut your daughter's penis off. Here you go. Look for signs of infection and just don't ever talk about it again.
Well, and that's the thing too. I didn't come out with ambiguous genitalia, which we know for intersex people, you don't always come out with ambiguous genitalia.
No, it's a very small percentage of the intersex population, actually.
There was, but there was a lot of some of the common things is they often say XXYs will sleep a lot. My mom tells a story that when they brought me home from the hospital, I slept for 18 hours. And they were panicked. I was their second kid, but they were like, this doesn't seem normal. And she called the pediatrician and said, do I wake him up? What's going on? We're a little concerned. And she was chastised and chided for even calling. And the doctor basically said some mothers would be ecstatic that their baby's sleeping.
Right.
There's not a problem. Let him sleep. And she kind of was like, but when I burn both ends of the candles or when I get really sick, I sleep. I had a roommate
Must be
about
nice.
7 or 8 years ago. Well, but they say your body needs sleep. It sleeps. And interestingly enough, as I moderate for different communities, you'll see people come forward and say, gosh, I sleep a lot. Is that a characteristics of XXY? And you go, yeah.
That's interesting. All right. So before we shift, Daniel John has said that he loved your brunette hair.
Oh,
And
thank you, Daniel.
Ethan is watching from Zimbabwe. And Juleigh A says that they're 46 with a lazy Y, I believe is what they're trying to say there. But I wanted to take a moment to talk about the XXY community that you're a part of and how some of them have had trouble accepting you, either because of the lack of science or the lack of desire to look at the science. Could you kind of explain to me what's going on there and why your own community is giving you a hard time?
Sure. So when I talk about finding out everything in the 40s, at 17, they said, we think you have Klinefelters, your one of your testicles did not descend. We're just going to give you extra testosterone. That should masculinize you out. That's what they were telling my parents too. And so that's what we did for many years. And then when I was in college in my 20s, I had a prostate cancer scare. And the doctor that I went to said, I don't know anything about genetics. They're not researching this particular topic. I can tell you that excess testosterone could put your body in a crux by your 40s. And he goes, if you can deal with a higher voice register and you can deal with being a little more feminine, then maybe you should get off of it and not do it anymore. And so that's what I did.
That was a good doctor.
He was a good doctor, right? He was a younger guy. But then in my 40s, I traveled overseas to Europe for 3 months. And while I was over there, I got bit by something and I ended up losing a toe in 2015. And at the hospital in England.
Now I know why you were worried about losing a finger recently. Sorry.
Yeah. So, I mean, and I had other issues too. I'd lost all my teeth at 35 while I was living in California. And so I get to this doctor in Colchester and he comes out and he was like, the research for XXY is being done in Japan, the UK, and Australia. And he goes, when you get back to the States, he goes, they're slow to the punch. He goes, I implore you to do all the research you can. Eat the good information, eat the bad information, become your own advocate. Everything that you've been going through in the last 5 years is absolutely tied to you being XXY. And we even talked about it. And I said, but XXY only happens to guys. And he was like, well, that's not necessarily true. And more women are starting to be identified as being born XXY. And he goes, you could, because you're technically a hybrid of both. He goes, you could essentially have more feminine features than male. Because XXY, right? I have that extra X chromosome. They said it's not necessarily a dominant or doesn't affect the other XY in the chromosomal makeup. And he said, but new research is starting to come forward that X is absolutely not just extra, but it makes a big effect on your body.
How could it not be, really? I mean, come on. Seriously, how could it not be?
Well, you have to
just got an extra chromosome hanging around.
So Dr. Klinefelter in the 40s was doing a research on the testicular disease. And he found and noted that there was that extra X, but he was like, oh, but it has nothing to do with anything. Mm-hmm. And in essence, that doctor, which a lot of people don't realize, he got naming rights. Patricia Jacobs, they say, absolutely discovered it. But I always say they were never going to give a British female geneticist in the 40s naming rights. They probably weren't. I mean, we know how they treat women in the world. They probably were like, yeah, you go sit in the corner. We got this.
Yeah.
And so she didn't get naming rights. Klinefelter, actually, the more information that comes out with him, he kind of would parade these men around that had gynecomastia and had taller statutes and a gut. And he would talk about their abnormalities and how much of a distress they are, and that they're going to grow up to become serial killers and murderers and child molesters. And
what do you think?
And that's the information they still hand out as late as this year. You know, we talk about how 60% of intersex individuals are often aborted. You know, we talk about 2% of the world is intersex, and people ask me all the time, that's not a big number. And I'm like, it would be if they quit aborting us. It would be if they quit doing these surgeries on us that aren't needed until we reach puberty.
Even if you go 1.7%, it's 139 million people. So
right.
Yeah.
So I came back to America after that, and I was rehabbing with my parents, and I really started to do my due diligence because I realized nobody else was going to advocate for me. And I went and took part in a study in 2018 at the National Institute of Health. And we went into the study, and it's a week-long study. And I equate it to like a mechanic taking apart a car, studying every part that's in that vehicle, and then putting the parts back together. I mean, it was intensive to the extent that when I walked in on that Sunday to do the test, they were willing to pay for somebody to come with me. And my parents were working and my friends were all working. And I was like, I'm a big boy. I can take care of this by myself. But on Wednesday, we did hormone draws. And that morning, my team of 8 doctors on this protocol walked in and said, we need to talk. They said, everybody produces testosterone and estrogen. Everybody does. And they were like, and for a male, you should have a quantifying amount of free range testosterone, and it should be over 800.
Right.
And you should have a free range of estrogen, and that should be over 600.
Right.
And they said, we're not really sure how you walked in this week because your free range testosterone score is 7.
7?
And your estrogen is 40. And they said, you obviously respond better to estrogen. They said, you may not know these things either. We don't believe as your medical team that you had Klinefelters because you have one ovary that's underdeveloped and one testicle that's, well, so for the community, they were like, well, you're not XXY because you need to have testicles. And I'm like, well, clearly that's not the case. And some XXYs are born with ovotestes. They went on to tell me that I had an underdeformed uterus. So I had like half a uterus. It didn't have all the full female things. That I had a female cervix pelvic floor. That I had a partial vaginal canal. That I had an underdeformed pancreas, a female-sized heart, but male-sized lungs, the upper skeletal system of a male, but a lower skeletal hip section of a female. And they said, and you now have lupus and osteoporosis of the lower back and spine. They said, there's not a cure for that. And they said, here's what we recommend. We recommend you going on copious amounts of estrogen yesterday because your body responds better to that. And we think if you do that, you'll have a better quality of life and you'll live longer. We think that some of the sores and issues that you deal with due to lupus will heal faster. We think that you'll just be in overall better health.
And they were correct, yes?
Well, yes. I mean, I said to him at the time, I said, yeah, I'm not sure I want to do that.
I can see that.
I said, I've built this whole career as an actor, and I've lived most of my life for 40 years as a male. And they said, but you're going to swing. I said, that'll cause a transition, and I don't consider myself trans. And they said, it'll cause a transition to the female end of your spectrum. But they were like, what's your alternative? Go home and do nothing? or
And
go home and
die?
have a hysterectomy, start the estrogen, and live a little longer. And I struggled with it. I tell people all the time in my own story, I struggled with it. And when I had to call my parents that night and share with them the directive, I think I led into it. I think I said to my mom that night, I said, do you believe that some of the best doctors in the world are at the National Institute of Health? And she said, yes. And I said, well, here's their recommendation. And my dad got on the phone. Sorry, I always get.
That's okay. That's okay.
I always get emotional at this point. And I said to my dad, I said, I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do. And my dad said, how long do they give you if you do it? And I said, well, I asked that question and they said they're not in the business of making predictions, but they believe I can get another 15, 16 years out of my life. And that if I don't do it, they think I'll be dead by 48. And my dad said, he said, it's a no-brainer. He said, I would rather lose you as my daughter in 15 to 16 years than to lose you as my son in 5. He said, you're going to go back in tomorrow and tell him you want that estrogen. And he goes, we're a family. We are going to support you. It's going to be difficult and it's going to be hard, but that's what families do. And we're not going to, he goes.
I've talked to quite a few men that have gone into menopause without knowing that they were ever going to have anything close to menopause, and had to start taking estrogen because it wasn't male menopause. It was like real menopause. And they had to start taking estrogen, and it just destroyed them. When I had to start taking estrogen, it was curing pain, and I would have taken anything. I didn't care.
I mean, I think what's hard with the community is most of the community, the XXY community, they struggle even with the word intersex, and I don't think they understand that is a medical umbrella that the medical community is using. It's not saying that you have to identify as intersex. I choose to identify as intersex because the more studying I do and the more people I meet and the more people I meet that are XXY, we really are kind of hybrids in that sense.
Right.
So,
well, I always tell people that I don't identify as intersex. I am intersex.
True.
It's not a gender identity, because
Correct.
the people that are pushing the surgeries on ambiguous children, that they are saying that intersex is a gender identity and not an actual fact. And so I always want to make sure that we make the distinction that you do not identify as intersex. You are intersex, correct?
I am an intersex woman, is what I say. So it's not, I don't identify as intersex. That is just part of my journey. I am female at this point. I also make a really important point that this is a vessel.
Yeah.
My soul is what is important. And people go, what do you mean?
It's a beautiful one, by the way.
And I said, look, religious or not, when you die, which we're all going to die, you don't take this with you. Your soul ascends, or whatever you believe, leaves the body, and the body is left behind. I've had the blessing to live my life in the male vessel, and I've had my blessings to live my life in a female vessel. It's just a vessel. It's like getting a brand new car, right? Which is why I established that with the NIH. It's like having that car. The driver is always going to stay the same, but people trick their cars out all the time to look the way they want them to look. And a lot of XXY individuals, this is what I think the community struggles with, is I'm willing to step up to the plate and be an advocate for the whole community. And I talk about the whole community in my advocacy.
Right.
But some people say, well, I'm not trans. I'm not trans either. Well, I'm not gay. Well, okay. Well, I'm straight and I'm XXY and I want to have a family. Well, you're free to have that in your journey as well.
You can identify as anything you want.
Right. If you want to be a box of brownie mix,
who am I to
say? Do you know what I mean? But like,
I do.
You're still XXY, and you're still going to have issues that a lot of us face. And we need to talk about those issues, and we need to talk about proper medical care, and we need to talk about educating. The NIH was really smart because in 2020 they said, look, not everybody born XXY is going to have Klinefelters. You have to be XXY to have Klinefelters, but not everybody is going to do it. Not everybody XXY is going to have a set of testicles, which you need.
Yep, absolutely.
To have Klinefelters. And there are women that are born XXY. I think in 2017 they discovered the first. Slowly, women are starting to come forward and saying, I'm XXY and I don't have any male characteristics.
I was just reading about a fellow that went in for a hernia operation. They found out that it was his ovaries. So they went and removed his ovaries for him. But he was quite surprised to find out that it was not a hernia.
I have an XXY friend in Miami that after I got back to the NIH from the NIH, she was sharing all these things with me. And I said, they still need people for this protocol. I think you should go because it'll give you a blueprint for the rest of your life and your health. And who doesn't want that? He had been having really horrible issues for 4 or 5 years with hemorrhoids. And to the point where he was in construction and he would tell me, he said, Juleigh, I have to buy feminine pads just so I don't have issues at work. And he goes, I get, made fun of, and people think, oh, your wife really has you wrapped around her finger, that you're carrying all her feminine products around for you in the car. And he goes, it's really embarrassing. He goes to this study and they said, heads up, you don't have hemorrhoids. And he was like, what is it? And they said, you're cycling once a month.
Mm-hmm.
And it's coming out the only place it can come out of.
Yeah, so they make fistulas to the colon and then you bleed through the colon. And I'm quite familiar with that scenario, to be perfectly honest. So, all right. I kind of want to start shifting gears here.
Sure.
Because I want to talk about your acting experience, but before we do all of that, you had some experience with Disney, and I want to bring up something about Disney because Disney is doing a lot to include everybody, and that it's important. There you are, and representation matters. And if you go to the creations at Epcot, they have a mannequin there that I think is the ultimate of inclusion and representation. And just reading the story about it brings tear to my eyes. But they have a mannequin child with a cochlear implant so that people with cochlear implants can feel included and that they're part of everybody. And they are actually represented by Disney, who tries to represent and include everyone. So I just want to make sure that we understand that Disney's including everyone and they're not picking sides. They're including everyone. So anyway, and the reason that includes you and brings you into this is because when you started working for Disney as a character, and I don't know if you want to say something about how your character, I'm not going to divulge anything about your character that you don't say first. So if you want to say anything about your character, you're welcome to do so. But or as we get into that, you were just finding out about being intersex. Probably, did you know the word intersex at that point, or did you just
they didn't have that word? I just knew Klinefelter syndrome. It was definitely a time in my life where I felt alone.
I call it Intersex Island. Have you heard me talk about that?
Yes, I have heard you say that. I definitely felt alone. For many years I thought I was gay and I hadn't come out to my parents yet. And I think I shared with you once, I think if I had gone into any other department at Disney, I wouldn't have had the same experience I had.
How do you mean any other department? Because I know the story a little bit, but I want to make sure that everybody understands
Sure.
that.
So if I had
Um,
been, if I had
and
been
this is Disney World, correct?
correct. So,
Okay.
and I've worked at Disneyland as well later on in my career, but had I been casted, they call you cast members. If I had been casted in, say, attractions or food service or any of those other departments that are integral to the park's operating system, I don't think I would have had the experience that I had in Department 384, which is entertainment, parades, and shows. And the reason I say that is because we were all young at the time, but I go into that department and it literally, in a way, felt like the island of misfit toys. Here we are providing a great service, entertaining the masses in parades and shows and character meet and greets. But you really, for me, everybody in there, you know, for the most part was gay or straight or,
And
you know,
how old were you at this time?
I
When
was
you
17,
first
I was 18. I was about 17, 18.
18. All right.
And the other great thing about it is the irony of putting on a mask, you know, getting dressed up in a character costume and going out into the park and identifying as that particular character and learning their skill sets and learning, you know, how to portray that in the best possible way for your guests.
Do they have classes for that? For like, if you're going to be a particular character, they have like a week or whatever of intense, this is what you got to do. You got to put your hands up like this, and when you clap, it's got to be like this. And when
so they have choreographers, they have staging assistants that help you with all of that. And then you go, normally when you get casted after your lengthy audition of, you know, doing ballet moves to hip hop music. I mean, they really throw everything at you. You know, they'll be like, you're this character and you have to show us that you're making a cake or changing a diaper. And you have to, you can't talk. So you have to, you know, kind of pantomime. And then they'll take you into classes and show you how each character is supposed to sign, and you just kind of learn it. They kind of throw you in by birth of fire. If you're doing a face character role, so if you're a princess or a prince or, you know, a character like Maleficent, or we say you're playing friends of, right? You're friends of, because you never want to destroy that magic for anybody that goes there and has this allure that everything is.
Well, you don't want to kill the magic, because even at my age, go there and I get caught up in the show, and it's.
I mean, I know how
I still feel the magic.
So. I know how it works, and I go there and I get super excited about the shows and the parades and can't watch the but you know, if you're going to do a face character role, they will take a week and send you to training for that particular role. You will watch a movie. You watch the movie over and over again until you're probably sick of it. And then they really critique you on everything to make sure that you come across as that princess or that prince before they even release you into the park. And then they monitor you. They'll walk out and watch you in parade and watch you doing park sets. And if at any point in time you slip on that character ideology, they pull you and you may not do that character for a while. So it's very intensive in that sense.
So when you started there, were you doing male characters at the time?
Yes.
Okay.
But I mean, that's the great thing about Disney too, is, you know, you may end up in a female character. You may end up portraying a female character sometimes just based on the needs of the park. Well, again, not ruining the magic. We don't really talk about it. But when I say I fit, right, when I went in there, and Disney will always be hands down out of everything that I've done, and I've gotten to do film and television and some really notable television things.
Yeah, we're going to talk about that in a minute or two.
You know, Disney was the park that set me up for success. Disney, in all of their teachings and their traditions and learning about Walt, and learning about the parks and learning about the different characters and spending time with the other people in Department 384, you really did feel collectively like you finally belonged somewhere. And you just fit. For me, it was validation. Well, it was validation that I was creative and I had talent, and that I wanted to be employed for that talent. And and then just the friendships you make. We talk about on Facebook Department 384 all the time. People don't know what that means, but I am still collectively involved in probably roughly 300 to 400 individuals that I worked with over my career at Disney. And
that's a lot of friends to make. How many years were you there?
I did characters, parades, and shows from 1994 to 1998. And then I left Disney World and moved to New York and started doing theater and Broadway. And then I moved out to California and worked some more. So collectively 4 years, about maybe 4.5 years, I did entertainment, parades, and shows. And then such a highlight, we call them kind of family dynasties, but when other people in your family end up going and doing the same thing that you were doing, my sister, my little sister also did entertainment, parades, and shows and was a dancer and ran into a lot of the people that I worked with, and they would say, "Oh my gosh, you're so-and-so's sister, and you look just like them." And she ended up doing princesses and roles, and she didn't do it as long, but there is a connection that is absolutely made. And then when you realize there are little moments in that, when you realize that nobody knows you beyond that character as yourself necessarily, but the impact you make on people is long-term. And Disney just showed me that, and maybe this falls over into the advocacy too, kindness is absolutely 100% free. It's free. And the things they instilled in me as an individual to be stronger, to test your limits, to push yourself. I learned all those things essentially growing up with my family, but Disney was saying, you still need to do all these, and we're going to focus on those points, but you do it with a little bit of kindness and magic, and just watch where you're going to go. And, Disney has a great quote, "If you can dream it, you can do it."
Right. So I don't even know how to ask this question. But you have a very optimistic, bright, sunshiny attitude most days. We all have the other days. Have you been that way throughout your childhood and into your adulthood, or is it something that developed by being able to be yourself, say at Disney, and learning to appreciate yourself and being happy because somebody actually said it's okay?
I've always been somewhat a happy child, mischievous, love practical jokes, love just kind of laughing. I think laughing is an important part. Growing up, people often will say, "Oh, you must have had a really disturbing childhood." No, not at all. I was extremely happy as a kid. I'm sure I had moments, but I say, even in advocacy, I don't think people are happy genuinely 24 hours, 7 days a week. I think we all
not without medication.
Without medication or copious amounts of wine. I think it doesn't happen. So we all experience that. One of the biggest things for me growing up, and it's not even I think, I know. And I know not everybody in our community, even in the intersex community, even in the LGBTQIA community, a lot of people struggle with religion. I was raised Christian, and my parents were always telling me, "You're special," and he doesn't create illness. He doesn't do any of that. You're special, and you have a place, and you have a reason to be here. And some people may not ever figure out their reason. And
that's pretty amazing that your parents had that attitude. Because
my father's faith, my father, even now as he's older, his faith has always been 100% at the front door. You see it. He talks about it. He's often told the children in my family, my siblings and myself, when you're struggling with something, leave it at his doorstep. Leave it at his feet. He's never going to bring you to anything that he doesn't bring you through. And I feel like as an ambassador for our community, but also as an ambassador as a Christian, especially now, it's very important to lead by example. It's very important to share that he wants you to be happy. He wants you to have joy in your life. One of my favorite scriptures is his eye is on the sparrow.
Yeah.
His eye is on the tiniest thing.
Yeah.
You can't think that if he doesn't have his eye on the sparrow, he's not also watching all of us. And he wants us to enjoy life. You're not supposed to go through life being downtrodden and depressed. He wants you to find the joy in life, whatever that may be for you on your journey, but he wants you to have that. He wants you to experience love. He wants you to give love. He wants you to be all things that he is, and so I think, yes, always happy, always kind of cheerful. Not always, like you said.
Right. I mean, you can't say always about anything. So
I would be remiss if I didn't tell you there were many times in my adolescent life and teenage life where I was suicidal.
Right.
And
was that because
that's mostly because I'm not understood. What I'm going through is not understood. It's not talked about because the medical community says abort them or get rid of them or put them in a home or, just leave them out to dry up and disappear. That's part of it. Then you had people that didn't understand what you were going through emotionally, physically, or even mentally that would then step into your life and say, they're just lazy, or they're not applying themselves, or they're not trying, and you're trying really hard on every level, and you're not finding a fit. You can't find a fit. And that was really hard for me. And I felt my spirit one day say, this is long before the It Gets Better movement. But I felt my spirit say, please hang in there. You have a purpose. I have a plan for you. Please don't give up. Please. And there are moments when you absolutely were like, nope, I'm out. I haven't seen anything from your end that's going to get better. I'm checking out.
I've been there.
But as an adult now in this form, after everything that I went through in 2018 and started to change, I started to figure out that this is my purpose. This is my purpose. To educate and change perceptions and talk about everything that happens in the XXY community, not just what's happening to me, to try and build that community up and make it stronger, but to also change the perceptions of the medical community and the world and the people that don't accept us because they don't understand. And that not understanding sometimes comes from fear, which comes from a lack of education. So that's why everything that we do as advocates is absolutely 100% important. I think going back to why the community struggles with me is I'm not your typical XXY. My journey has been extremely explosive in some ways, and there hasn't. And they don't want to necessarily be tied to me, and they don't want to be tied to somebody else that's going through something different. And they don't want to be tied to the gay community, and they certainly don't want to be called intersex. And that's when you come back and you're like, look, you don't have to call yourself intersex, but the medical community has placed you under this umbrella because we're on this spectrum, and that spectrum is called intersex. So whether you identify that way or not is okay, but that's how the medical community is.
And don't get mad at us for talking about it. All right, so I want to talk to you. Hold on. There's a comment, if Bosch can bring it up, from Daniel John for you. And I think it would be better if you saw it that way. Can you see Daniel's comment?
Daniel John, I love you, Jules. Bishop.
So I thought I would bring that to your attention before we move on down the road. Anyway, I want to talk about you about your acting career.
Sure.
After Disney, because you're quite the accomplished actress, and you also have a music album out, so How did you go from Disney to? I'm guessing you went to New York and acted in plays after that. Would that be correct?
Yes. So after Disney, I left and moved to New York. I got to New York and I got a job as a singing waiter on Broadway, Broadway and 51st at a great establishment called Ellen's Stardust Diner. That makes you grow. I mean, I saw a lot of things in the adult world that I'd kind of been sheltered with up until that point. And I had gone to West Virginia University for theater and communications, but ended up not finishing my college career. So I moved to New York and I started doing off Broadway. I did a great show with a great writer named Mark Morales, a friend of mine, and his girlfriend at the time, Carrie Otera. They were producing these off-Broadway shows, and so I auditioned. And we were at the Horse Trade Theater in New York, and I got to do a show called Edge of Insanity and Edge of Insanity 2. The great thing that Mark did was he would write parts for you based on your experience. So because I had worked at theme parks and I had been a tour guide already in my life, he wrote this great role about a tour guide that didn't want to be a tour guide anymore and really wanted to be a dancer in a show called Solid Cheese. So I loved that, and I started to do that, and then I was auditioning for Broadway. I think what was really important to me as an early actor and actress was that, you know, I'd heard so much about how you're not going to make it. You're not going to be viable. You're not going to fit into society. You're not.
Well, I'm pretty sure they tell that to everybody that wants to be an actress in New York, don't they?
Well, they say that, but I was talking about just the medical community and kind of what had already been pre-established. So every little tick that I got to tick off on my resume became a very important moment for me, because I was like, ha, I can't do this. Watch. You're going to tell me no? Watch. And so I did that for many years. I did that for many years. And then I left New York in 2001 and on 9/11. That was interesting. And flew out to LA and started auditioning for television and film, because that's always been my passion. I love theater. I love the live aspect of theater because you get to really think on your feet, and I excel at being witty and kind of thinking in a crisis mode. But
you've never been short for words, have you?
You've never been and then started doing film and television out in LA, and then moved back in 2009 to be a flight attendant for Southwest. That didn't end up working out for me. Went back into acting in LA and started to get even more roles. Now, though, I was getting roles of being female. You know, I was still male at the time in the male vessel. And they would say, hey, we want to hire you to play a supermodel on Desperate Housewives. Hey, we'd like you to play a dead hooker on CSI. Hey, we're going to cast you in this movie as a male. But, I started to get more work, and I thought, okay. So then I was doing drag some, and I opened up a comedy show in Santa Monica at a theater called the West Side Comedy Theater Club. They're kind of the preeminent improv theater on the West Coast. A lot of people have gone on to Second City and done other things with them. And I created a show called Drag Through the Alley, where I would come out and drag and be glamorous and fabulous, and I would introduce the show and tell stories from my life. And then my cast was all straight men that would dress in really bad drag, like Monty Python drag, and they would improv and act out the stories. And that ran for a year, and that was kind of my first delve into producing and really having a say in that. And so I did that for a while. So, I mean, and I continue to act and do stuff, and did Vampire Diaries in 2015. I've been on Glee. As a
so out of all the shows you did, which one was are you most proud of, should I say?
You know, the one that got me my Screen Actors Guild card, everybody talks about those moments. I did a movie called First in Flight about the Wright brothers for the American Film Institute. Mm-hmm. And I got to play a couple of characters in there, but that afforded me to get my Screen Actors Guild membership. Okay. And that's huge when you're an actor. I mean, that really is kind of a coming to age, fruitious moment. And so I would say that was one of my favorite. It's hard because Desperate Housewives was fun. I got paid the most I've ever gotten paid in my life for being a dead hooker on CSI. I didn't have to do anything. I just had to lay in an alley covered in trash, and I made like $3,800 for 16 hours of work. So like, that was a favorite one, right? Money doesn't last always, so that was a fun one to do.
I could sleep in an alley for a long time for that kind of money.
Right. You say action, don't breathe. I think when the scene actually came out, what you laugh about Hollywood and entertainment is when that television show actually came out. I was super excited about that episode, and you just end up seeing my legs in fishnets.
Right.
But during the whole process, the actor was like, "Don't breathe," and you're like, "I'm trying." Maybe that's why they didn't show my body. Maybe you can see me breathing. Like
maybe. I don't know. I've always wondered how people do that because I'm one of those people that they show somebody on the slab. I'm looking to see if they're breathing. Are they breathing?
Are they still alive?
What happened there? All right. So you also got a podcast going called Rosé All Day. Can you tell us something about that?
I do. Rosé All Day. So last year, so during the pandemic, I really started doing what everybody else was doing, which is TikTok. And slowly, my TikTok account was growing and growing and growing. And the next thing you know, I have 170,000 followers. I call them my little cocktails because I bartend sometimes. And so I refer to them as my little cocktails. But somebody was watching one of my content videos and came into my life, and she said, "You have an amazing story." And she said, "You have an amazing platform, and you have the opportunity to change just so much in what you do." And she goes, "I work for a PR company, and we would love to help you reach that goal." And so she said, "We think you need a podcast. We're going to put you on Apple. We're going to put you on Spotify. We're going to put you on YouTube. We're going to really build your channel." And so we started doing that. And she gave me a wonderful outlet to continue. It's just another platform to continue to educate about it.
Absolutely. And the more times your voice is out there, the more chance somebody's going to hear it.
It also brings in a lot of hate.
Oh, boy. Being an intersex activist is not for the lighthearted.
A lot of hate, I really struggled last year trying to find how I wanted to use the podcast, because in telling my story, which is absolutely 100% important, and in sharing some of the legal battles that I've had to deal with like my birth certificate in Alabama, which we're still working on.
Why don't we touch on that for a second, if you don't mind?
Sure, absolutely.
What is going on with the case in Alabama? I thought it was already settled.
No, so it is not. Alabama, their vital records government, we'll just call it that, in order to get your birth certificate altered and changed from the gender that they assigned you at birth, you have to prove that you went out and got a penis or a vagina.
Right.
Not so much in the trans community now. I think they're starting to figure out ways to get around it. And I have heard of a few trans individuals being able to get their birth certificate amended. But in the way of intersex, I have all this medical documentation. It reminds me a lot of the scene in Pretty Woman where Julia Roberts is sitting opposite Hector Alonso, and she goes, I have all this money. And she throws it up on the desk, and she's like, but nobody will sell me a dress. And I'm like, I have all this medical information for you that I am, in fact, both, and I should be able to change my birth certificate, and you're not budging because I haven't sent you a picture that I got a vagina, which that's ludicrous to me. So we've been kind of in limbo about it. I have a great attorney in Florida, also one of my best friends, and she worked with me at Disney World, and that's how I met her and her family. She and the UCF legal department have been giving me pro bono advice and assistance for the last 2 or 3 years. So they helped me change my name in Florida. They helped me change my driver's license, right? but I'm from Alabama. And they were hoping that if Florida accepted it and accepted that I don't need a sex change in order to be intersex, then Alabama would follow suit. But Alabama didn't follow suit. So Florida in September of 2020 said, yeah, you're absolutely female. You don't need a sex change operation. You're XXY. We support that. Florida supports that. And then Alabama was like, show us your vagina. And I was like, I didn't have to get one. So we've been in limbo with them. And it's just a constant thing. Now, some people in the trans community will say, you should just fill out the paperwork to be trans and get your birth certificate and be done with it. But I don't identify as trans. And I don't want necessarily the government to label me as trans. And not that there is absolutely anything wrong with that. It's just that that's not my identity.
Well, I don't want that on my medical records because I have different medical issues than a transgender person. And
correct.
It wouldn't be accurate and would send people off on the wrong direction.
Well,
and it's just important.
And it's important for our whole community not to make them have to go change documentation and say I'm trans, especially if they're not, you know, and so it's important. Now in Florida, my case was the first legal case in the state of Florida that had to do with intersex and XXY. So I was being called a pioneer. That was kind of hard to kind of accept and acquiesce to, because you're like, I don't feel like a pioneer. I'm just doing what I hope anybody would do for somebody in my community. As I go into Alabama, I understand the repercussions of that because it's such a fight of the toxic masculinity that's in Alabama and the kind of old school white.
Right. All right, Julie, so we're coming to the end of the show. So I want to ask you, how do people get a hold of you if they want to know more about you?
So the best way to reach out to me is just message me or email me at Juleigh@justjuleigh.com.
Can you spell Julie for us? Because
I can. It's just like it is on screen. It's Juleigh. People often say that's an interesting way to spell it. That's a story for another day that I also share on TikTok and on my webcast and blogcast. And I have a blog, but everything is housed at justjuleigh.com. So you literally can go to justjuleigh.com and find everything there is to know about me. You can read my bio, you can read my history, you can read my blog, you can contact me through the contact page, you can see what I'm up to calendar-wise. So that really is the best place to find me and message me and get in touch with me. And then follow me on TikTok, because, you know, I'm that girl now that wants 1 million followers. And it's, you know.
Why not?
Why not? Go
2 million ears. Oh. Anyway, Julie, I want to thank you so much. You're an inspiration, you're uplifting, and your positive attitude just makes me feel hopeful for the entire intersex community. So thank you so much for being part of the show.
Absolutely.
And hopefully we will have you again someday.
I would love that. It was so much fun. I would love that very much, Jessa. I would love that.
All right, then. Thank you very much. You have an awesome weekend, and stick around. Don't leave, because I want to talk to you after the show.
Absolutely. Bye.
All right. Excuse me. Thank you for listening to the original Intersex Connect Live. To find out more information about Julie, the original Intersex Connect Live, to watch prior episodes, leave comments or content on social media, visit us at the original intersexconnectlive.wordpress.com, or you could just Google the original Intersex Connect Live. Make sure you like and subscribe so you don't miss future programs and programs, articles, announcements, and more. If you are interested in volunteering to help create the original Intersex Connect Live, visit our website and send us a message. I'm Jessup Benedict. See you next time on the original Intersex Connect Live.